It's really more about our beauty ideal, our appearance ideal in
Yeah.
society, of being thin, of having perfectly symmetrical features, of, being a certain height. And for the guys, again, being more developed and stronger and having muscles and that six pack or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So there, and it comes from the fitness industry. There's so many areas that it's coming from,
Mhm.
and it does make it very challenging. And because they're so connected, our teens are so connected, they see it all the time, and it's in
Yeah.
their face almost 24/7, and it is rewiring their brains, and it is having an effect. And there is research on this, so it is a known concern that this is
Mhm.
happening. And so we have to really be cognizant of that and try to help manage that as much as possible.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Positively Healthy Mom. I'm your host, Laura Ollinger, teen and parent well-being coach and founder of Positively Healthy Coaching. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Leslie Rose-Dethloff. Leslie is both a mom and master certified health, life, and nutrition coach who understands the challenges of raising teens and launching them into adulthood with the confidence they're ready to live healthy and confidently. As her role as a health and wellness coach, Leslie guides teens, college students, and their parents in overcoming weight, eating, and negative body issues. So this is going to be a really important topic today. Obviously, a very sensitive topic. So I'm really excited to get into it. So Leslie, what makes you so passionate about doing this work with teens, young adults, and their parents?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the podcast today. I'm really excited to talk to everyone today and share the information that I have. And hopefully it helps anyone listening who may be faced with some of these challenges that we're going to be talking about. So thank you. So why I'm so passionate, I think, is really because I see, well, firstly, I was touched personally, and I'll get into that if you want me to. I can talk about that. But also just being around teens, working with teens, and seeing what they're going through in today's highly technical world, always turned on, screens and devices, and what's happening with body image, what's
Yeah.
happening with confidence and self-esteem related to that, and what the outcome often is for a lot of young girls, especially, is eating. They start to connect their eating with their body and feeling like they need to change what they're eating. They're fearful of gaining weight. They're fearful of being different, being noticed, and so they oftentimes will start to take into their own hands their eating, and unfortunately, it doesn't always go great. So that is why I think it's so important to really, and especially your audience with moms wanting health, and having that perspective of health and wellness and healthy lifestyle. It's really important. I, as a mom, went through it myself, very health focused, and yet my daughter still had challenges. And so I thought, okay, I've got this under control. We've eaten healthy since they were little. It won't be a problem. And it was.
Mhm.
So I had to work through that challenge with her and helping her to overcome what she was dealing with. And a lot of it is oftentimes related to body size, shape, perceptions, beliefs that develop because of what they're exposed to today.
Yes, 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 is we all know kind of just right in their face at any moment that they pick up their device, they're going to see something that's probably triggering. So, what
Yeah.
are kind of the beginning ways as far as how a child might develop an eating disorder? In other words, I know kind of sometimes it starts this like slippery slope of dieting or cutting out certain groups, like types of foods. So, like, tell me more about that.
Yeah, yeah. So, really, the first phase is what we call disordered eating, and that is just abnormal eating behavior. So, it's dieting, and in our culture, dieting is very highly accepted. But
Mhm.
for a young body that is developing and growing and changing, that is absolutely something that you don't want to have your child do. they need the calories, they need the nutrition. And when they start cutting out, as you mentioned, cutting out foods, cutting out carbohydrates, cutting out fats and being fearful of fats, going vegan, there are some very good things about vegan, but you can be a very unhealthy vegan. And what that does though is it's a way of them masking what they're really doing. They're, saying, well, I want to go vegan, but what they're really doing is trying to control what they're eating in a way to try to manage or lose weight, even when
Mm,
they don't need to. You can have a child who is looks healthy on the outside and seems like an average size person and they are still fearful and wanting to control what they're eating and those calories and what's coming in. So dieting is definitely an early sign if they're wanting to diet, if they're
mhm.
wanting to restrict foods, if they're wanting to eliminate foods. The other end of the spectrum can be when they can't control their cravings because they're doing that and then they're binging. And it
Okay.
can be occasional. But these are the things that start to grow over time and has a potential of moving into an eating disorder. So the one thing that I think oftentimes moms don't realize, parents don't realize, is it's essential to step in as soon as possible.
Mm,
Because once that starts to develop, it's very difficult to unravel. So it's really critical to step in and say, "Hey, I notice you've been eating differently lately. I've noticed that you've been cutting out carbohydrates. I'm curious what's going on here. Why are you doing that? What do and understanding where their thinking is and trying to make it a safe, open space so that they feel comfortable and they are willing to divulge what's going on. How are they
mhm.
feeling about themselves? How are they perceiving themselves based on what is the information that they're taking in? And that's
Yeah.
where things like social media come in.
Yeah. I'm so glad you gave us some language of what to use if we do notice something, because I know as moms, we know what a delicate, sensitive issue this is. And to the idea of like even bringing it up at all seems scary. And like we're somehow going to damage them or cause them some pain or make something worse that wasn't already there. Like, it's like so having those tools as far as like how to like notice it, get curious about it, just have them try to open up without judgment from us, I'm assuming, and just like being really like a safe space. Do you have anything more to add on to that? Because I think that was such a key part, that conversation part.
Yeah, it is a key part, and it's what I work with moms on is helping them to connect with their teen. As they grow and change, they're going from child to, transitioning into adult. And so the teen years, that's one of the reasons why they're so difficult is because they're trying to establish independence and we're still kind of managing instead of now mentoring. And so there is some changes that we need to make and we need to adjust. And some parents are able to do that, and others, it is more of a struggle depending on the child, depending on their background, whatever it might be. So learning to connect, and those are some ways of doing it, is by having curious, thoughtful
Mhm.
conversations, showing empathy, showing acceptance, even if you're uncomfortable with what they're doing, just saying, okay, I see what's happening for you. And I know that must be tough for you. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we can do. How can I support you? Asking them versus telling them versus trying to control, trying to manage. There's
Yeah.
that tendency to come in and swoop in and fix.
Yes.
We want to help out, we want to manage, we want to solve it for them, but they have to figure out how to solve it. And it's our guidance and our support that we're there kind of walking side by side with them instead of leading or pushing them. And I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that's the key difference.
Yeah, you and I are very much in sync because this is the type of thing I'm talking about all the time, but not
Great.
specifically in relation to the food part, but just in relation to the relationship and all that. So, yes,
Yeah.
makes so much sense. What about, because this is something I do hear a lot of, I've had multiple clients where the mother was concerned about the daughters, and this is multiple people. So there's just kind of this fear when daughters are eating a lot of sugar because that's super common for teenagers to like do a lot of junk food, do a
Sure.
lot of sugar. And so moms start to get nervous, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like at what part, because I don't know, does that fall into like, that's not really disordered eating. That's kind of like normal teen eating, but like, where is the line on that?
Yeah, it is a gray line, but I think it's when it is consistent, it's frequent, and it's replacing normal healthy food, right?
Mm,
It's replacing meals, and or it's cutting back on meals, and they're focusing mostly on that. They're preferring it. They're eating it before a meal and then eating less. Like if you're noticing a change, then that's when it's important to step in, have conversations, and do what you can to support. There's also great ways that you can do, things that you can do at home to make shifts where you're not taking away. The last thing you want to do is take away because
right.
they're resourceful. They're
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
They're going to figure out how to get that. And I think it's not so much being concerned about the sugar per se, but more about their mindset around food and helping them to look at food in a different light and managing that so that it's more about food for nourishment and food for fuel.
Mhm.
And when you start talking in those ways, and that's how I help a lot of moms, it is helping them to understand that the way that you shift the dynamic and the thoughts, then it's opening up possibilities for them and it's getting them to think in a different way. Like, why am I eating all this sugar? And is it
Mhm.
serving me well? And yeah, I'm noticing that I'm not focusing so well at school or at homework at home after I just had a bunch of candy or
Mhm.
sugary foods or whatever. And then the other thing that you can do at home is look at what you're serving, what is available, what is in the pantry, in the cabinet, and are there ways to cut back on the added sugar in things?
Mm,
So, there's a lot of different ways that one, you can just go and do and make changes at home that are supportive, but not taking away things. It's just better than sort of foods. And,
right.
and then having those conversations and role modeling it. Like, you also need to be thinking about, am I eating as a good example, the way that I'm eating. Am I eating a lot of sugar?
Mhm.
And am I struggling with sugar? And what should I do about that?
Mm.
So teens definitely notice and they definitely will call you out if they feel like you're hypocritical,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
there is one other thing that's coming up for me right now, which is I've also seen, and same in my own family, where a lot of girls love to bake. And so
yes.
baking and like cook and bake, but like the baking just seems like the fun part. Like it's a fun activity because you're making like a sweet treat. And so it's kind of like this, again, gray zone because we're happy that they're doing something they love. It's a hobby. They're not using technology. They're being productive. But then it becomes this like, again, slippery slope where, oh, they've created all these treats. So now they're going to eat them and test them out. And what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think again, you want to be careful about, saying, oh, we can't bake or don't bake or that's unhealthy. It's all about balance, right? It's, sweet treats are fine. Those are all good as long as there's a good balance of healthy, nutritious food throughout the day. And it is a creative outlet for a lot of young girls, and it is fun, and it is, they're active, they're doing that, like you said, versus being on screens and things. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just more about the frequency. Is it becoming a gateway for them to be eating those sweets all the time? Are they sharing those treats with everyone, neighbors, friends, whatever? Or is it they're just consuming it themselves? So noticing those nuances and what's going on and talking about, how can we bake a little bit differently using whole wheat instead of white flours, using monk fruit sugar instead of white table sugar, using honey or maple syrup. Finding different ways or using fresh berries in a baked good versus a fruit or an applesauce or things like that. So and that can be creative and that can be fun. Trying to bake with them so that you can see how they're baking and give them suggestions, but in a way that it's collaborative and that it's something that you're doing together and you're finding a common bond is great. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having those sweets and with the baking. And I think it's just, support it, but just also keeping an eye on it and making sure that it's not going in a way that it does start to raise a red flag. Like, okay, are they really, baking too much? And is it too many sweets and
Yeah.
not eating well the rest of the time?
Right. Right. Okay. Well, thank you. That definitely clears it up so much. Quick pause in this episode to tell you on April 30th at noon Central Time, I'm hosting a free webinar for moms called Get Through May Without Losing Your Joy, Your Mind, or Yourself. And if that title just hit you somewhere, go save your spot right now at positivelyhealthycoaching.com. If you can't make it live, no worries. Sign up anyway in advance and I'll send you the recording. And so what should moms know about the causes? I know we've kind of identified as the technology being a big source, but you mentioned that there are three major causes of kind of weight and body image issues, or I don't know if that's categorized as body dysmorphia, or kind of can you help us maybe define those terms and then also kind of give us the causes of them?
Yeah. Well, I think I like to put it more in the term of body image
Okay.
because body dysmorphia is like a diagnosed disorder, by body dysmorphic disorder. But body image challenges are more about just feeling uncomfortable in your own skin, feeling like you're different than, comparing yourself and judging yourself, and not being satisfied with how you look. And again, it can be in any body or shape, it doesn't matter, or size. I think causes one is the rapid changes that are happening with adolescents, right?
Mhm.
They're going from being a child with no shape at all most of the time, or very simple, to developing. They're developing breasts, developing hips for the girls, and for the guys, they're starting to change in their shape and their shoulders, and maybe they're not growing as quickly as some of their peers, and they're feeling kind of, you know, small and
Yeah.
like kind of punky.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a combination of those things. They're going through these changes. Sometimes the changes are rapid. Weight gain it happens. It happens in the adolescent years, and it's something that sometimes they'll gain a bunch of weight all at once, and then they grow out. They start growing up, getting taller, filling out more, and so then that all kind of settles in. But it's during that time when maybe they've gained weight. They've gained 15 pounds, 20 pounds, and they're really getting uncomfortable. And so then they start developing some of these behaviors. So just the natural process of maturing and body changes can trigger some of these behaviors and self-beliefs and discomfort with their body.
Hmm.
The second one, which we've touched, kind of referred to a few times, is social media, but it's not just social media.
Yeah.
It's really our society. It's television. It's advertising, brands, and then social media. But
Hmm.
it's a combination of all that. It's really more about our beauty ideal, our appearance ideal in
Yeah.
society, of being thin, of having perfectly symmetrical features, of being a certain height, and for the guys, again, being more developed and stronger and having muscles and that six pack or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So there, and it comes from the fitness industry. There's so many areas that it's coming from,
Hmm.
and it does make it very challenging. And because they're so connected, our teens are so connected, they see it all the time, and it's in
Yeah.
their face almost 24/7, and it is rewiring their brains, and it is having an effect. And there is research on this, so it is a known concern that this is
Hmm.
happening. And so we have to really be cognizant of that and try to help manage that as much as possible. We can't take away, I mean, it depends on the family and what their approach is on devices, smart devices and things like that. But for the most part, you don't necessarily want to take away social media, but
Right.
maybe managing that, reducing the amount of time on social media, having conversations about it, things like that. And then the third one is from peers, and it can even come from within the family. So people around them, your environment, you know, have they, since they were little, have they been called pudgy, or, having nicknames that make them feel and make them focus on their body? It could be friends who are very conscious and doing their own things on their own diets, saying things about their own bodies that are an influence. It could be someone else in the family, a grandmother, another relative who is making comments and kind of maybe picking on their eating and things like that. So there are several different areas that this can affect someone.
Mhm.
And as a young person growing and changing, they're just much more vulnerable because they're very self-focused, trying to figure out, who am I? How do I fit in this world? How do I compare? And so this is an area that can bubble up. I mean, you think about some kids who start to self-doubt and start to struggle, whether it's anxiety, loneliness, self-confidence, things like that. They
Mhm.
might start to get into smoking or vaping to feel better. They might
Mhm.
get into marijuana or something else. They might get into drinking. They might, there's a number of things that they can do to kind of numb themselves or feel better, to get a dopamine hit,
Right.
um, you know, to distract and release, and food can be that. And so if they're feeling bad about their body, sometimes food becomes, oh, well, this will solve it for me. And if I start changing how I'm eating, if I, start doing that, I'm going to be able to change my body and then I'll be happy.
Yes, yes. That kind of leads me into my next thought, which is just about like self-esteem, low self-esteem. There's obviously that correlation between, like, low self-esteem and poor body image. So what can moms do to help with that?
Yeah, I think it is, again, watching social media, who are they around, having those conversations, being open about, the ideal body is doesn't really exist. I mean, no one can ever have a perfect body. No one can ever be perfect, and that's okay. To be, imperfect is perfectly okay. So I think that, just continuing to have those conversations. What are you looking at? How does that make you feel? And staying connected and understanding, where's their mind at. That's the key, is really don't assume you know, don't assume you understand, really doing your best to try to get on their map, get in their mindset, understand where they're coming from. And even if you can't fully agree or accept, just letting them know that you're there to support them and that you want to help them make good, healthy choices in their life. Because we're developing them to launch, right? We want them to be healthy, functioning, happy young people when they go off to college, when they go off to a career, when they move out of the house. We want to know that they're going to be okay. And so it's very important for us to stay tapped in as much as possible and be that guide that makes them feel safe and makes them feel like, okay, if I'm struggling, I can talk to you and that you are going to support me.
Yeah, that's also leading me to my next thought, which is when our kids launch and they're kind of off and many of them go to college, some don't, but wherever they are, when does a mom need to call you because they're concerned? Like how does that even work? Because they're far away. We can't really, besides maybe FaceTiming them necessarily, we're not there. And so at what point do we just need to like step in and say, okay, something's not right here. I'm concerned. We need some help. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I think it's a little different for everybody, but I think the first thing is, as a parent, is making sure that you have the tools and the practices in place to support them. So because while we often think that, oh, they won't listen to me, they're not listening to me, it's because we're not speaking the same language and we're not truly understanding them. So it's important to first educate yourself and make sure that you are really on the same page and you're understanding them so that you can support them, because that's often why they will reject us, is because they feel like you're not listening to me, even though you feel like you are. And they're feeling like you're not listening to me and that you don't care because you're not empathetic enough. So again, it all depends. Every situation is different. But when they start to go off to college, I have a program for first year college students called the Freshman Formula, and it's for them. And it really helps them in a number of lifestyle areas. Oftentimes, when high school seniors go off to college or before they go off to college, the total focus is on academics, the dorm room, just getting prepared and ready. But what we completely overlook is, how are they going to live on their own? Are they truly ready for the lifestyle factors that they're going to be facing, making new friends, getting sufficient sleep so that they are able to study and perform at in their academics, eating well so they're fueling their body. And, there's all of a sudden they're in a dining hall. There's no one's cooking for them. There's no rules or restrictions. And it's just like an open field, and they have to kind of navigate that and that out on their own. So are they prepared for that? Um, movement and exercise. There's a number of lifestyle areas that often get overlooked. Stress management. How are they going to cope? When things do get stressful, they're on their own for the first time, most of the time, like truly on their own, and they're feeling overwhelmed and uncomfortable. What do they do? How do they manage that? So my program really helps with that. But besides that, I think it's also like when to step in is when you start to see, like, you start to notice things that are changes that aren't quite normal. And yes, there is that transition period when a child goes to college. There's going to be that first, 3 to, I mean, anywhere it can be up to like the first year and a half of transition. But the more primed they are before they go, the quicker they assimilate and they do better. But if you're seeing those signs, then the best thing is first to talk to them about it. There's often a lot of universities, a lot of colleges have support services so that you can guide them to those. And having conversations, being in touch with them, get on the phone frequently, talk about what's going on. Again, letting them know that you're there supporting them, that you are concerned, and that there are outlets, there are resources. And then the option is, bringing in someone like me who can work with them directly one-on-one and be able to help them. The key with that is they have to be willing to do the work, right? You can hire someone, but if they're not willing, it's most likely not going to go well.
Yeah.
They have to want to be able to talk about what they're going through. They have to want to be able to do the work and put the time in and the energy that sometimes is a little difficult because it's emotional work. It's inner self work because that's where it's coming from originally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for spending this time with me today and sharing with our audience all this wisdom. And so, how can people find you going forward?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Leslie Rose Coaching, or my website, leslierosecoaching.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
When you get a chance, please go to the show notes and click on the link ratethispodcast.com/tphmom to give my podcast a rating and review. And if this episode resonates with you, be sure to share it with your mom friends who are going through the same things. Be sure to tune in for next week's conversation. Until then, keep up the good work.